The galactic void stretched below, a boundless expanse of dark matter and distant stars, vast and alien. At its heart, the Terran fleet drifted, a collection of human ships small yet fierce. They were explorers, pioneers, and warriors, driven by a relentless desire to seek out the unknown and conquer the impossible. However, they were unprepared for what was approaching. Commander Ian Vav stood at the helm of the Eclipse, the flagship of the Terran fleet. His dark brown eyes narrowed as the holographic display before him began flashing warnings. An unusual anomaly had appeared on their sensors, something out of place. He leaned closer, his fingers deftly navigating the console. "Run the scan again," he commanded, his voice tinged with urgency. "Aye, Commander," responded Lieutenant Darrell Song, a quiet yet competent officer. She adjusted the frequency of the ship's scanners, her brow furrowing as she rechecked the results. "There's no mistake. It's a fleet." "A fleet?" Ian's voice carried a mix of disbelief and excitement. "Where? I don't see anything." Ariel looked up, her eyes wide. "It's not showing up on normal wavelengths. It's a cloaked fleet, Captain, or something we've never seen before." The silence on the bridge thickened. This wasn't their first deep space mission, but it was certainly their most mysterious. Vav had encountered many strange phenomena in his career, but a cloaked fleet that eluded their systems was unprecedented. "Get the fleet on alert," he ordered. "Activate shields and prepare for evasive maneuvers. Whatever this is, we need to know more." The crew worked with the practiced precision that came from years of spacefaring experience. Within minutes, the Eclipse was enveloped by a shimmering force field, its weapons systems humming in response. Outside, an entire armada began to emerge from the shadows of deep space. The ships were massive, ancient, and imposing in their design, clearly military vessels, their dark hulls marked with the insignia of an empire Vav did not recognize. It was as if they had materialized from the fabric of space itself. From the viewscreen, Ian could see the enormous flagships of the enemy, their designs sleek and brutal, bristling with weaponry. They were unlike anything the Terrans had encountered. 1,000 questions swirled in Vav's mind as he stared at the fleet, but one thought stood above the rest. Who are these people? "Commander, I'm receiving a transmission," announced Communications Officer Ensign Michael Hayes, his voice cutting through the tension. "It's in a language we don't recognize." Ian leaned forward, his mind racing. "Patch it through. Let's hear what they have to say." The audio clicked on, and for a moment, there was only static. Then, a voice came through, heavy with authority and ice-cold arrogance. "This is the Galactic Empire. You stand in the presence of the supreme military force in this sector. Identify yourselves immediately or face annihilation." The transmission was direct, devoid of any diplomatic niceties. They weren't asking for names, they were demanding answers. Vav straightened, his jaw clenched. He glanced at his crew. "What do you make of this, Lieutenant Song?" Ariel scanned her console rapidly, her fingers flying across the touch interface. "It's as if they think we're insignificant. That voice, it's condescending. But they don't seem to be fully aware of us. They've probably never encountered humanity before." Ian's mind raced. This encounter was no ordinary event. The sheer tone of the Galactic Empire's transmission screamed arrogance. But what could they possibly know of humanity? The Terran fleet was far from a primitive force. Their technology was highly advanced, their ships cutting edge, and their resolve unbreakable. "Set a course for them," Vav said, his voice steady, full of resolve. "Let them know who they're dealing with." The crew obeyed swiftly, adjusting the ship's trajectory with a few key commands. The Eclipse powered up its engines and shot forward into the heart of the enemy fleet. But even as the ship moved, Ian knew this was a gamble. They had no idea what kind of weapons or tactics the Galactic Empire wielded. However, he wasn't about to back down. As the Eclipse neared the lead flagship, a massive hologram of the Galactic Empire's insignia appeared before their viewscreen, a gleaming silver circle adorned with symbols that glowed with an unnatural, forbidding light. It rotated slowly, like a predator circling its prey. A second transmission came through, this time more aggressive. "Foolish humans, do you not know who we are? You dare approach the Imperial fleet without fear?" The voice now had a mocking edge. "You are nothing more than ants before us. Your ships are toys, your weapons laughable. Stand down and prepare for immediate surrender or face total annihilation." Commander Vav stood, his heart pounding but his mind as sharp as ever. His entire career had been built on thinking fast, acting decisively, and never underestimating his enemies. He knew the Terran fleet was stronger than these alien overlords realized. There was no fear in him, only a rising excitement at the challenge ahead. He leaned into the comms, speaking with authority. "This is Commander Ian Vav of the Terran fleet. Your threats are meaningless. You've just made the mistake of underestimating humanity. If you want to see what happens when you poke the hornet's nest, I'm happy to show you." The comms cut off abruptly, but Vav could feel the tension building in the air. The Galactic Empire might have underestimated humanity, but they were about to learn the hard way that the Terrans were far from just another enemy fleet. They were survivors, warriors, and conquerors in their own right. Vav returned to his seat, glancing at his crew. "Prepare for battle," he said, his voice calm but filled with the certainty that humanity was far from weak. The Galactic Empire had no idea what they were about to face. The eclipse accelerated, the other ships in the fleet following suit. They were entering the heart of enemy territory now, and it would be a fight that would define humanity's place in the galaxy. The tension on the bridge was palpable, thick enough to cut through with a knife. The eclipse was closing in on the lead ship of the Galactic Empire, its massive hull taking up the entire view screen. Outside, the stars blurred as the ship accelerated toward their enemy. Commander Ian Vav stood at the helm, his hands steady, his mind focused. He had been in plenty of combat situations before, but this felt different. The unknowns were piling up faster than he could count, and every instinct in him screamed that this fight would be unlike any other. "Enemy ship shields are online," Lieutenant Daryl Song reported, her voice tight with concentration. She flicked switches on her console, bringing up more data. "They're powering up weapon systems. No sign of retreat. Prepare to fire," Vav said, his voice calm but carrying a dangerous edge. "Target their engines. We want them crippled, not destroyed." "Aye, Commander." Ariel's hands moved with practiced precision, locking onto the massive ship's propulsion systems. The Eclipse's weapon system hummed, ready to release the devastating barrage it had been designed for. "Sir, they're opening fire!" Michael Hayes, the comms officer, shouted as his fingers raced across the interface. On the view screen, a series of blinding blue energy blasts shot toward the Eclipse. The first wave of attack slammed against the ship's shields, creating ripples of energy that shook the entire vessel. "We're holding steady," Ariel said quickly, her voice calm despite the chaos around her. "Shields are at 85%. We can take another round." Vav's lips twitched into a slight, confident smile. "Let them throw everything they've got. We're just getting started." "Firing!" Lieutenant Daniel Ruiz, the weapons officer, called out. The Eclipse's pulse cannons released a volley of high-powered plasma shots that streaked toward the enemy flagship. The blasts hit their mark, striking the enemy ship's lower hull. Sparks flew, and a blast of light erupted from the impact zone. The Galactic Empire's ship shuddered, but its shields held. Another salvo of blue energy rained down on the Eclipse, but this time, Vav was ready. "Deploy countermeasures." "Full evasive." The ship lurched as it swerved to the left, narrowly avoiding the incoming blast. "Nice move, Commander," Ariel said with a brief smile, her fingers a blur as she readjusted their flight path. "I'm bringing us into range again." The Eclipse's shields flickered dangerously, but they held firm, absorbing the blows. Vav's jaw clenched as he watched the enemy ship, a massive and imposing behemoth that looked like it could tear them apart in seconds. Yet, he felt an unwavering certainty. Humanity had survived against every odd, every threat. They were not bound now, not to this empire. "Targeting engines," Ariel said as she punched in the final coordinates. "Locking in. Ready to fire now." "Lieutenant, fire!" Vav snapped. The Eclipse responded with a fierce barrage of plasma fire. The shots streaked across the darkness of space, cutting through the distance between them. This time, the enemy ship wasn't as prepared. The plasma burst struck its rear thrusters, and the shock wave of the explosion ripped through the hull. The massive vessel shuddered, its engines momentarily faltering. Smoke billowed from the impact site as the ship's propulsion systems went into disarray. The Galactic Empire's flagship began to drift, caught in the wake of its own damaged engines, a slow, painful process that left the crew of the Eclipse with a brief moment of respite. "We've got them," Vav said, exhaling slowly, watching the enemy flagship sputter in space. "Hold off for now. Let's see if they're willing to negotiate." Ariel's console buzzed to life, flashing warnings of incoming enemy fighters. The Imperial fleet wasn't just sending their flagship into battle, they were sending everything. "Sir, they're launching a fighter wing," Hayes reported. "We've got dozens of small craft heading our way. Get us out of here." "Full speed," Vav ordered, his mind already calculating their next move. He knew their fleet couldn't match the sheer firepower of the Galactic Empire's flagship, but they had the advantage of agility, speed, and unpredictability. "Full speed ahead," Ariel barked. The Eclipse shot forward, dodging enemy fire as the small but agile Terran fleet followed its lead. Vav's eyes never left the viewscreen, his heart pounded with the realization that this was their moment. Suddenly, the Eclipse veered sharply to the left, its engine screaming in protest as it shifted direction at full speed. Vav's hand gripped the console, his body instinctively moving in time with the ship's every maneuver. Behind them, the Imperial fighters swarmed like a school of angry fish, following their every move. "Firing on incoming fighters," Riz said, his voice steady as always. The ship's weapon systems roared to life, sending a barrage of plasma fire toward the enemy fighters. One by one, the small Imperial craft were torn apart, their blazing remnants scattering across the black void of space. The Eclipse danced through the debris, narrowly avoiding the larger remnants of the battle. They were pushing the limits of what the ship could handle, but the human crew was relentless. They knew how to fight, how to survive, and how to adapt. "We're clearing the fighters," Ariel said, looking over her shoulder. Her expression was one of intense focus, but there was a flicker of triumph in her eyes. "But their flagship is still in pursuit. We need to finish this, Commander." Ian's gaze remained fixed on the Imperial flagship, still moving with menacing power despite its damaged engines. A realization struck him: the battle wasn't over, not by a long shot. The Galactic Empire might have underestimated them, but it was clear they weren't giving up easily. "We finish this now," Vav said, his voice steady and confident. "Prepare the secondary weapons. We're taking them down." The crew nodded, fully aware of the stakes. This wasn't just a battle, this was a declaration. The Terran fleet was not to be dismissed, and they would show the Galactic Empire what humanity was capable of. As the Eclipse readjusted its trajectory and prepared to launch a final assault, Vav looked once more at the imposing flagship in front of them. The Galactic Empire had made a grave mistake in underestimating the might of humankind, and now they would learn the price of that mistake. The Eclipse closed in for the final strike. The battlefield stretched across the stars, a chaotic dance of light and death. The Terran fleet, once scattered and disorganized, now formed a wall of fire and fury as it pressed its assault on the Galactic Empire's flagship. The Eclipse led the charge, its hull still scarred from earlier blows, but its spirit unbroken. Commander Ian Vav stood at the helm, watching with calculating precision as the remnants of the Imperial fleet struggled to maintain any semblance of order. "Status report," Vav called, his voice sharp and steady as the ship rattled under the barrage of incoming fire. He didn't need to glance at the viewscreen. He knew that every inch of this fight mattered. The human fleet was facing the full might of an empire that had conquered countless star systems, but they were not backing down, not today. "Shields are at 60%, Commander," reported Lieutenant Song. Lieutenant Daryl Song reported, her voice betraying no panic despite the chaos around them. "Our weapons are primed. We can take another hit or two, but we need to end this quickly." Commander Vav nodded, fully aware that time was of the essence. The enemy flagship, despite its damaged engines, remained a formidable adversary, firing relentlessly. The blue energy blasts that streaked toward the eclipse lit up the void of space like lightning. Yet, even as the enemy advanced, a growing sense of confidence brewed within Vav. Humanity had been underestimated, and now they had the opportunity to prove their resilience. "Get us closer to the flagship," Vav ordered. "We need to strike at the heart of their ship. Target their weapon systems and disable them entirely." Ariel's fingers danced across the console, adjusting their trajectory. The ship's engines roared as the eclipse surged forward, dodging enemy fire in a daring maneuver. Behind them, the rest of the Terran fleet followed suit, each vessel weaving through the storm of energy blasts with agile precision. As they neared the flagship, Vav's heart pounded. He could feel the weight of the moment, the fate of humanity's place in the galaxy hanging by a thread. If they failed, it would mean the end of their exploration, their dreams of colonizing new worlds, and their entire future as a galactic force. This battle was not just about victory, it was about survival. "Shields are holding steady at 55%, Ariel reported, her eyes flicking between the console and the view screen. "We're within range. Target locked. Fire," Vav commanded, his voice low and controlled. The Eclipse's weapon systems unleashed a devastating volley of plasma fire. The shots struck the enemy flagship's side with brutal force, tearing through its outer defenses. The ship's hull buckled under the onslaught, sending ripples through its structure. Yet the flagship did not go down. It was still fighting, still trying to bring its weapons to bear. "Reinforce shields," Vav snapped. "Get us in closer. If we can't destroy them, we'll take them apart piece by piece." The Eclipse surged forward again, slamming into the heart of the Imperial flagship's defenses. The immense ship loomed in front of them, a monolithic presence that should have been unstoppable. But Vav knew something the Empire didn't. Humanity fought for something deeper than power. They fought for their future, for each other, for the survival of their species. "Captain, we've got company," Ensign Michael Hayes called out from the comm station. The enemy's fighter wings had regrouped and were now diving in from all directions. It was a desperate, final effort, a last attempt to break the human fleet. "Evasive maneuvers," Vav barked. The Eclipse veered hard to the right, narrowly avoiding an incoming blast from a fighter. Plasma shots flew past, grazing the hull but never finding their mark. The Terran fleet danced through the barrage of fire with deadly precision, a blur of movement that left the enemy reeling. "Launch countermeasures," Breeze called from the weapons station. The Eclipse deployed a series of flares and electronic jammers, creating a cloud of interference that disrupted the targeting systems of the enemy fighters. The small Imperial ships exploded in flashes of light as they collided with the decoys or each other, their attacks rendered ineffective. Vav could feel the tide turning. The Galactic Empire's once imposing force was starting to break apart. The Terran fleet's tactics, hit and run, lightning-fast strikes, had worn the Imperial forces down, and now it was time to finish the battle. "Commander, their main weapons array is exposed," Ariel said. "We have a clear shot at their command center." "This is it." Vav's gaze hardened. This was the final strike. If they could hit the heart of the enemy flagship, they could end the battle. Humanity's victory would be complete. "Prepare for the final assault," Vav ordered. "All hands brace for impact." The Eclipse surged forward once more, its engines roaring with raw power. The enemy flagship's massive cannons fired, but the human ship was already moving, darting to the side with astonishing speed as the Terran fleet closed the gap. Vav's pulse quickened. Ariel's voice was calm, but there was a flicker of excitement in it. "We've locked on to their main reactor. Ready to fire." Vav's lips curled into a confident smile. "Fire everything we've got." The Eclipse unleashed its full firepower in a final, decisive salvo. The blast hit the enemy flagship dead center, piercing its massive armor. The explosion that followed was blinding, a violent shockwave that sent ripples through the fabric of space itself. The flagship's reactor core detonated, sending a shockwave that shattered the remaining Imperial vessels. Hours passed, and the Eclipse and the rest of the Terran fleet began the painstaking process of repairing their ships. The damage was minor, but the psychological toll was greater. The fight had tested their resolve in ways they hadn't expected. Yet, despite the weariness settling in, the crew knew they had made history. Humanity had just taken its first steps into the wider galaxy, and the message had been clear: they were not a species to be underestimated. As the crew worked, Vav stood on the bridge, staring at the stars. The victory was theirs, but he felt the weight of what came next pressing down on him. This was a new era for humanity, one that would be defined by the choices they made from this point forward. "Commander," Ariel said, breaking his thoughts. She glanced at the nearby sensor station. "We're picking up something, a signal. It's faint, but it's from another fleet." Vav's heart skipped a beat. "From whom?" "I'm not sure," Ariel replied, her fingers working rapidly to bring up the signal. "It's coming from the other side of the galaxy, too far to be Imperial." The hairs on the back of Vav's neck stood on end. A new threat? An ally? Or perhaps something even more dangerous? The uncertainty gnawed at him. Humanity had just won its first battle, but the galaxy was a vast, unpredictable place, and in that vastness, the Terran fleet would need to stay vigilant, ready to face whatever came next. "Send a response," Vav ordered, his voice steady. "Let them know we're here and that humanity doesn't take kindly to being ignored." Ariel nodded, tapping at the console. The signal would be sent, humanity's message to the galaxy. The Empire had been beaten, but the real fight was just beginning. The crew worked in tense silence, preparing for the unknown. The Eclipse would not be caught off guard again, and Vav knew that whatever was coming, humanity would face it head-on. They would adapt, they would survive, and above all, they would never bow. In the depths of space, the fate of the galaxy was about to change.